Hello, my name is Quickfall, and when I was at university, I was identified as being dyslexic, and I set up a business providing IT systems for people with dyslexia at my university, and that business has grown over the years to become one of the largest disability services providers in Britain. And one of the reasons for that growth, I think, is we've been really good at becoming specialists in the application of cognitive neuroscience and building that neuroscience into our service delivery. And we looked at one of the biggest challenges with education and training, and we think that we can solve that problem with a really robust application of cognitive neuroscience. And that idea was Cognassist. So your brain is really complicated. It moves chemical elements around, such as sodium and potassium, to create chemical electric potential differences. And those potential differences open and close synapses that allow chemical electrical energy to flow through those synapses. And you've got about 1 quadrillion synaptic connections in your brain. In fact, that makeup of synaptic connections and that structure is so unique to you that no human ever to existed and no human that will ever exist will ever have that same structure. It's completely and utterly unique. The other thing about the brain is it's really, really expensive. It only weighs 2 to 3% of your body mass, and yet it consumes up to 20% of all your calorific energy. And life would be super simple as an educator if every brain was actually a carbon copy of the other brain. But it's not as easy as that. And in education, the first 150 years, we spent assuming it was and trying to batch produce every brain. In fact, if someone turned up and they were left-handed, we would tie their arm behind their back and force them to use the right hand. And we realized that that probably wasn't the best approach, and that if you want to really educate people, if you want to become effective at distribution of knowledge, then we need to figure out how that brain processes and responds to information, and then we need to adapt our delivery to it. And that's even more important now, because most of the global growth that occurs in all economies is occurring because of the knowledge economy. So we need, as a society, need to become really, really effective at distribution of knowledge so that each individual, within the minimum amount of time, can learn, retain, and utilize the maximum amount of information. And the challenge here is that this cognitive diversity introduces complexity. So if I'm a teacher and I'm working with one individual, I can adapt, change my language, my pace, my approach, my constructs very easily. If I'm working with 2 people, I can still do that. If I'm working with 3 people, it starts getting a little bit more complex. If I've got 5 individuals, it now becomes reasonably unmanageable. It is not possible to do it with 30 individuals. What if I'm a robot and I'm a learner management system, or I'm a MOOC, and I've got 200, 300, 500, 1,000 learners logging in, absorbing my content? How do I, as a robot, understand how to structure, manage, process the speed of that content to get the best out of all of these users? So the challenge is complexity, and that challenge compounds with scale. So we need a key to try and unlock that complexity. We believe that key is the application of cognitive neuroscience. And I'm going to use this very simple example on how I can change the way that I communicate, and that change will affect the way that your brain processes information. And I'm going to do that by showing you a picture of a duck. And now I'm going to show you a picture of a rabbit. And now I'm going to show you another picture of a duck. And now I'm going to show you another picture of a rabbit. And what we're doing there is using our understanding of how brains process information to manipulate the way that your brain processes, understands, encodes, and then recalls that information. Now, if we want to solve that complexity problem, how do we build a deep application of neuroscience so that we can come out with this sort of key? Well, first of all, we need to get a brain. And then with that brain, we need to push information into that brain, which we do with software. And then we need to record how that information comes back out of the brain. And we want to record the type of information that comes out, how accurate it is, and how fast it's come out as well. And then we use that to build a data profile of that brain. And then once we've got this data profile, we can query that brain, and we can start asking questions on it. And from the responses of those questions, we're able to build up a program of recommended adaptations to support and optimize cognitive learning within that function of cognition. And we do that by making recommendations to humans so that teachers can adapt the way that they approach one-on-one, or to robots so it can autonomously adapt the way it delivers or constructs information. But if cognitive neuroscience is the key, we've had cognitive neuroscience around for a long time. It was the early 1850s when the modern day research in cognitive neuroscience began. And then when MRIs came, that understanding accelerated through non-invasive analysis of cognition. So we've been really particularly good at this for 40 years. Why is it only now that we're able to deploy this type of technology and solve this big problem? Well, we just couldn't do it because the technology wasn't available for us to be able to deploy this at scale. But with cloud computing and artificial intelligence, we're able to build this type of solution now. And with Cognassist, what we've been doing is we've been evidencing this application in the work-based learning market for 2 years now. We've mapped 50,000 individuals and they've built data profiles on their cognition. And we've used that to inform learning objectives, learning interventions, and how their brain can better process information. And more recently, with COVID-19 coming on, and all of those learners having to dissipate out into home environments and undertake remote learning, we built a series of queries that allows us to analyze anybody that's had a previous assessment and predict what sort of struggles they're going to have in that remote learning environment, so that we can inform their educators or their workplace about reasonable adjustments and specific interventions that should be made to support that cognition. And we're building out this technology because tomorrow, all of these learning systems are going to be interlinked. And when they're interlinked, we're going to need a utility that allows us to understand how someone thinks and learns. So we can augment teachers, and so we can inform those robots on how to make this adaptive learning. And that's a global problem we're trying to solve. Thank you.